We're live. Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Gill. You know me as Mueller, She Wrote. This is The Breakdown. Please forgive this. I went for a run this morning. I was hearing all the stuff about the emergency hearing with Mr. Abrego and his lawyers, Andrew Ensign from the government. And joining me is, of course, Adam Klasfeld of All Rise News, who's been reporting extensively on both of Mr. Abrego's cases, the criminal and the civil immigration case. And so, Adam, we just got off this emergency hearing, and I think it went really well for Mr. Abrego. And I just wanted to point out something, the thing that really stood out to me about this particular hearing. Everybody was pretty agreeable, and we can talk about what's next in a second. But when Judge Sines asked the government, "Is my oral order enough for you, or do you need me to put it in writing?" Uh, Drew Ensign said the oral announcement is enough, but that is a little bit of a callback, isn't it, to Judge Boasberg's courtroom when he ordered the planes be turned around in a verbal order. And then in his written order, he didn't quite put that all out there. And the government's argument for not turning the planes around was that, oral orders don't count.
Right.
Only written orders do. So when Judge Sini said, "Is my oral order enough for you? Will it suffice?" I thought it was like,
And
ooh.
and there were 2 out of 3 Trump-appointed appellate judges that were willing to dignify that argument. So it was a good note of caution from the judge. And of course, Drew Ensign said at that moment, "No, your oral order is enough." But here we are, where judges actually do need to call back like that, as you said. There was another standout moment of the hearing, Allison, and it really just goes to the heart of this, because I think this weekend, what people find both shocking and not surprising is this game of leverage that Trump always does, where if you plead guilty now, we'll send you to Costa Rica, which is a human rights respecting nation, where you can live out your days as a refugee or a resident. We have it in writing from the government of Costa Rica. And then he decides to decline that offer and avail himself of his rights to be released on bail, hard fought in 2 hearings that we spoke about in Nashville, Tennessee, and to fight it out at trial. And then they say, "We'll give you an ultimatum. Either you take that deal again now, or we try to send you to Uganda." And the moment during the hearing that stood out to me the most was Judge Zini saying in no uncertain terms, you can't condition the relinquishing of a constitutional right in that way. And that's a preview of what's to come, because to me, if she lays down that very basic principle there, the government has never denied that it did that. You had Kilmar Abrego Garcia's attorney this weekend on Saturday saying that's what happened. He showed the letter from the Costa Rican government. He showed the email from Trump's Justice Department, I believe it was. It might have been the Department of Homeland Security. Either way, the notification saying that they intend to send him to Uganda. And then the government had an opportunity to respond. Was it this kind of condition that was laid it out? And the 5-page memo, they act very indignant that there was anything coercive about it, but they don't deny at any point in that 5-page memo that that's exactly what they did, that they showed, 2 doors here. If you give up your constitutional rights, we'll send you to a human rights respecting place where you speak the language. Otherwise, we'll send you to Uganda without any guarantees that they won't send you right back to El Salvador for further torture. And they just have the chutzpah to say that that's not coercive, that's not sinister, that's not coercive, but this is all going to play out in court.
Yeah, I think it is. And something else that was interesting to me is in the petition for writ of habeas corpus filed by Mr. Abrego's lawyers today, they brought up the fact that the expert witness from the Department of Justice had testified, or from ICE, excuse me, the ICE agent had testified that Mr. Abrego's detention wouldn't even be taken into consideration until he was detained by ICE. But then we saw this back and forth all week about plead guilty, go to Costa Rica, don't go to Uganda. And they brought that up, and which, and rightfully so, because they were like, we now know that testimony is false.
Right.
And I think that Judge Sinise, when she brought up, presuming everyone here is acting in good faith, I thought that might have been going to that particular argument, but they didn't get into that today. And also in their filing, they said that this Saturday, a little bit of breaking news, this past Saturday, Mr. Abrego declared that his preferred country to be deported to was Costa Rica, and that it's available. You said it was, and it shouldn't hinge on whether or not I avail myself of my constitutional rights, and that's what Judge Sinise was talking about today.
Right.
But just for a little bit of background, so everybody is kind of clear on this, during a July 10th hearing, the government brought in an ICE agent because Judge Sinise was trying to get to the bottom of what the government was planning to do with Mr. Abrego should he be released from criminal custody in Tennessee. And they said, we don't know. It's just going to be a regular guy working on the front lines at ICE that detains him. And then after he's detained, in the normal order of things, we decide what third country we're going to send him to, or whether we're going to try to overturn the order that prohibits us from sending him to El Salvador and send him there. And the Judge Sinise was like, not buying it. Like, what do you mean you're not coordinating about what I don't believe you, basically. And then that turned out to be true. And so I think and we'll get to basically what this hearing resolved today, because it's basically a scheduling hearing.
Right.
But I think that the best case scenario here for Mr. Abrego, provided he's deportable, it is legal to deport people to a third country, but you do have to give them due process, like to allow them a reasonable fear interview under the Convention Against Torture Act. But if he is deportable, he chooses Costa Rica, which was offered to him, but he doesn't want to have to plead guilty to go against, so he doesn't, he's allowed to avail himself of his constitutional rights. But this also, the whole thing, Adam, just sort of belies the government's initial declaration that they were going to go to the ends of the earth to take him to trial for these they call human trafficking crimes. They're not. He's not charged with trafficking, but that they're going to go to the ends of the earth to put this man on trial for his crimes, which he was let go of regarding in 2022 when he was pulled over. He didn't even get a ticket.
Right.
But that, all of this now belies that declaration from Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, that we will stop at nothing to make sure he gets his day in court and try him for these crimes. No, now they're talking about deportation.
Yeah, it would be an end run against a trial where he would have the right to defend himself. He would have the right to assert his constitutional rights. This entire habeas case is about the punishing of Kilmar Abrego Garcia for asserting his constitutional rights. It says in writing the petition that's what it's about. That's what's going to be adjudicated. That's why we're going to have an evidentiary hearing. I think the judge floated a time at the end of this week. This could happen very quickly, where we will see witnesses to get at the very question, to get at this deal, this ultimatum that was put forward by the government right before his release. Because let's take a step back here. The fact that he had an opportunity to see his family, and there's video of him hugging his wife and children, that reunion was something that Kristi Noem said was never going to happen. It was something that all of these Trump officials said was never going to happen, and they tried to prevent it from happening. The original deal was plead guilty to this 2-count indictment on human smuggling charges, and we'll avoid having to show you with loving photos of your family. It'll be a big embarrassment for our administration because Kristi Noem testified to Congress. He'll never step foot on U.S. soil. So they tried to avoid that and tried to avoid that with a guilty plea on the 2-count indictment, delaying his release on bail. And that would have, once he served a sentence, which would have been light, because again, as you noted, Allison, these aren't trafficking charges, which are a 20-year kind of sentence that Ghislaine Maxwell has. But a 1 year and a day sort of sentence. That's the range, the average range that we're talking about here. And he would have gotten to spend the rest of his days in Costa Rica. That was the deal. That was what he rejected. And that is why this discussion of Uganda is even in the mix.
Yeah, and something else that none of the merits here have been touched today. This was just to extend the restraining order, barring the government from moving him far away from, Tennessee and Baltimore so that he can have counsel and appear in court and stuff like that, which is Drew Ensign was like, I'm not authorized to promise that, but I'll have discussions, So she's like, fine, I'll put it in my order. You can't move him. And then she said, and I want to be very clear here. This was the order, the oral order that she wanted to make sure that would suffice, that he will not. He is barred. He's prohibited from being removed from the continent, the continental United States. So you're not doing that, right? And it's kind of scary, and it sort of shows the diminishment of the presumption of regularity that she has to assume that the government is acting in bad faith or might put him on a plane to Abilene and fly him out of Bluebonnet to Uganda tonight, right? And
Right.
so Ensign was like, that's not necessarily going to happen. But I can't authorize that, but I don't think that it's imminent. And what's interesting is when he says, I don't think that's imminent here, that's part of the filing, the writ of habeas corpus today, is that he's being punished for availing himself of his constitutional rights. And it's not necessarily the potential deportation to Uganda that's the punishment. It's the extended detention in ICE here that would result from what the government knows will be a very lengthy litigation with their threat to deport to Uganda. It could take months. And so what Mr. Abrego's lawyers are arguing is not necessarily it's punishment, and Uganda is not necessarily the punishment. The punishment is, this is going to be a lengthy litigation, and he's going to be detained by ICE for 6 months. That is the punishment for availing himself of his rights. And that's what they're going to be arguing when they come up with when they'll have this hearing.
Absolutely. And it's both too, that they are seeking an order blocking his deportation to Uganda, that make it Costa Rica would be the first choice if it came to that. But it is also, of course, they're challenging the very basis of his detention, as you noted. And to your point, Allison, just taking a step back and looking at everything that came before this, they made accusations against this man, some of which they charge, some of which they don't bother to charge and they don't bother to support. The gang accusations, every judge who has looked at them has rejected them. The last judge to look at them, Judge Crenshaw, said that the government's allegations border on fanciful. So they, rather than bringing it in court and letting the process play out, we see this strong-arm tactic that door number one, you play ball, we'll let you go to Costa Rica. And if you don't play ball, you go to Uganda. Now, look, plea negotiations sometimes in the United States have been coercive, that there are tactics where the government says, if you don't play ball right now, and we'll have a superseding indictment and there'll be heavier charges. Or if you have a death penalty case, we'll take death off the table. That's the normal stuff. What I haven't seen in 20 years of covering this beat is taking a naked exercise of power that has nothing to do with what the government may or may not prove at trial. It's not maybe your family was involved in this crime and we might prosecute them if you move forward, which is something that Michael Cohen says happened to him. That is something that sometimes happens in federal prosecutions. But what does not usually happen is the government saying, we will dump you somewhere on the global map beyond your control simply because the Supreme Court has allowed us to do this recently. And if you don't help us save face, because we brought these charges and we don't want to stand trial, have you defend yourself at a trial on these charges. That's something that's really different. And the word that the government denies about this, sinister.
Yeah, and because if the government has to go to trial on this, if it's not dismissed for vindictive and selective prosecution, if they do have to go to trial, I don't think they're going to win. And that's embarrassing. Just like the discovery process that Judge Sini's ordered was embarrassing for them, which led them to investigate the 2022 traffic stop and bring charges so that they could avoid the discovery and releasing the agreement that they made with Bukele, which we've gotten most of now anyway. Which included, a potential prisoner swap with Venezuela and handing over MS-13, actual MS-13 gang leaders that they had. Pam Bondi had big press conferences about indicting, but then dropped the charges and handed them over to Bukele so that he could do what he wanted with these MS-13 gang members he made deals with, because that's embarrassing to him. So a lot of this is punitive. It's to avoid embarrassment. And I think that Judge Sini sees through that. But Mr. Abrego is asking to be released from custody. He's asking not to be moved off the continent. And he's asking for, if I'm deported to a third party, give me Costa Rica, because all this other stuff is blatantly punitive and to avoid embarrassment for the government. So I think it's going to be interesting, but that's what was discussed in the hearing today was just a schedule, because Mr. Abrego has filed his writ for a petition for a writ of habeas corpus. And so now the government gets to respond to that. And then Mr. Abrego will get to reply to that response. And then there will be an evidentiary hearing. So what the judge ordered today was, first of all, I'm extending the temporary restraining order. And I'm reminding you can't remove him. And please keep him within reasonable distance of his two court cases. And is my oral order sufficient for you, Mr. Government Man? But also to meet and confer tonight, the plaintiffs and the defendants, the government and Mr. Abrego's lawyers, to determine if Wednesday for the response and Thursday for the reply and Friday for a hearing are sufficient. But it did catch my attention that Mr. Ensign was like, we don't have to move so quickly. He's in custody. And that's sort of an admission that the punishment for him availing himself of his constitutional rights is detention.
Right. And, it's interesting what we know would happen at trial without even going to speculation. This is now a matter of public record because there have been these evidentiary hearings in connection with the bail hearings. So whether or not a jury of his peers found him guilty of the crimes charged, the government would have to take on the stand their star witness. And they'd have to explain that their star witness has been convicted twice of the charges that they're accusing Mr. Abrego of. They would have to
and
explain
asylum and a work permit.
that he has been deported 5 times, that Mr. Deportation, Donald Trump here, has granted that the star witness against Mr. Kilmar Abrego Garcia is the man who they allege to be the head of this human smuggling operation, a 5-time deportee that they're doing favors for in order to testify against Kilmar Abrego Garcia. With that star witness and a relative of that man, who is another star witness who has been convicted of similar charges, do they want the spectacle of those witnesses testifying against Mr. Abrego under the theory that, well, maybe there'll be a conviction. But the entire premise of this being about fighting human smuggling, and that they take the two people said to be at the top of the scheme to go after the person they allege to be a driver, that that is the allegation against Mr. Abrego. And I would posit, no matter what the outcome of that trial, this trial would be a huge embarrassment. It would be a running highlight on the dirtiness of the deal, in order that what this is all about, one doesn't need to speculate on what the outcome of that trial would be to know that this would be an embarrassment for the Trump administration. And one more thing that I'll say today, there was a press conference in front of Baltimore's, the ICE's Baltimore field office, and Mr. Abrego gave some comments. And it is absolutely remarkable that he must have been informed by his lawyers that the government was extending an offer, and that the other side of it was he would face kind of possible retribution, that he was facing the possibility of being sent to Uganda, and the possibility of that government offering no protections for him and maybe sending him back to the place where he was tortured. And to deliver the speech that he gave in front of the Baltimore ICE field office, to deliver it in the manner that he did, it's floating around the internet. I encourage everyone to look for it. Uh, a moving speech, and to show that at this moment, knowing what he knows, knowing what he's possibly facing for not pleading guilty, and knowing the life that he could be leading on either end, it's a remarkable thing that happened this morning. And I encourage folks watching this right now, look for the speech that was delivered in front before his check-in. He's right now in a detention center somewhere in Virginia, his lawyer just said. He knew that when he was checking in, he knew that minutes after that speech, he would be voluntarily checking in, not voluntarily, but it's a mandatory hearing, but still showing up, checking in, and likely to the custody of a government that is putting that ultimatum in front of him. And he delivered that speech. That's the context for that speech.
Yeah, it was certainly a profile in courage, because how easy would it have been to just plead guilty to those 2 counts,
All right.
serve a year, and then go live it up in Costa Rica, where you have those protections in writing from the government of Costa Rica, and to say, no, this is a violation of my constitutional rights that I availed myself of, namely suing the government, namely asking for a bail hearing, getting released, those things that are, he's got a constitutional right to do. To stand up and say, I'm not going to take that deal, a very good deal, because he, let's be honest, he's deportable, and you can deport people to third countries with some due process in place, and especially now since the Supreme Court says, yeah, go ahead, do what you need to do. And that came out of the South Sudan case, and they had to arrange to have due process given to those folks in South Sudan. But then that was, in that particular case, they ended up going to South Sudan. So yeah, it's definitely a profile in courage. And these criminal charges are, if they go forward, are going to be extremely embarrassing. It's like letting John Gotti go to get his testimony on a getaway driver that worked for him. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Andy McCabe and I talked about it. He's like, this is the most backwards thing. You roll up on big fish. You don't roll down. And you certainly, if you're the deporter in chief, don't give asylum and a work permit to somebody who's been deported 5 times and is a felon. And let him out of prison to a halfway house to boot. So we'll see what happens. They're going to be giving their, they'll meet and confer tonight, both sides. They'll give their proposed schedules for a briefing and a hearing tomorrow at 10 a.m., I believe, local time there. And then, you'll be covering, I know at All Rise News, you'll be covering the government's response, Mr. Abrego's reply, and of course, the evidentiary hearing, so that she can probably order a more permanent injunction against his removal and possibly his release. But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see what happened. What will happen. I do plan to cover that evidentiary hearing. It is at the first date that she threw out there was this Friday, so it could be very quick. For folks who want to follow both of our coverage of this, look at the top left of the screen right now. You can hit subscribe for both of us. But yeah, Allison, I do plan, I'm sure that both of us will be following this closely, because right now, with the filing of this, yet a new lawsuit, there are three separate Abrego Garcia dockets, that there is a new avenue for information about this case. We're going to learn more about what came to light this weekend about the two different doors. Door number one, Costa Rica. Door number two, Uganda. What's the genesis of that? Is the government still trying to pursue that? What is the timeline going to be? As you mentioned, the court order had uh, said, had there been a 72-hour notice period. So technically, before anything else is done, there should be no movement toward removal until Wednesday at 4:01 p.m. because the notice is now a matter of public record. It was Friday at 4:01, and we're talking business days, so the weekend doesn't count. So there is a degree of protection, but it's not a long period of time, and that's why hours after the filing of this case, we get another immediate hearing. We get a very fast briefing schedule. Things are moving very quickly because that's what happens about the nature of these methods of coercion. So
Yeah.
I expect we're going to see very quick movement in this case. And it's a very good education about the power of standing up for one's rights. That in this entire episode, if we take a step back here, and at the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and look at it in from a bird's eye view, they whisked him away from the country in March to a terrorism prison in El Salvador, what Judge Zini's called one of the most dangerous prisons in the Western Hemisphere. 160 days later, he went after a number of statements from officials. He'll never step foot on U.S. soil again. He's reunited with his family after winning several civil and criminal legal battles. And now is yet a new challenge, a challenge to deprive him of a trial on the accusations that they leveled against him. And, we will see. It had looked pretty bleak in his case for a very long time. This is another very bleak moment because government has great powers when it comes to deportation that may or may not be within the authority of the federal judge. But it's looked pretty bleak in the past for him. And we'll see what happens at these hearings, because that's been a running theme in this case, that the assertion of his rights has um, resulted in victories, very real, tangible victories, and we've seen it in in images of his being reunited with his family, and more.
Yeah. And I think that the best case scenario in my mind is that the charges against him are dismissed and he is allowed to be released from ICE detention pending his deportation to Costa Rica. I think that is probably the best case scenario in this case. And for him to have stood up and fought for it, and his lawyers to have fought for it in both of these cases, now all three at every step of the way, I think shows just incredible chutzpah on his part. And we will keep an eye on it for you. You can always, like you said, subscribe to All Rise News and get all the notifications that you can that you've ever wanted, everything you've wanted to know about Mr. Abrego and more, by subscribing to All Rise News. You can also subscribe to The Breakdown, my Substack. It's always free, and I appreciate everybody joining us today. And Adam, I really appreciate you covering this. You have such a good legal mind, and it's great to be able to have these conversations with you, and to have you there in the thick of it, at the press conferences, at the hearings, or dialed into them. And that is, I think, the benefit of independent journalism. And so if you are able to support Adam Klasfeld's work, you can do that on his Substack as well. So I appreciate your time today. Any final thoughts on this?
Well, thank you, Allison. That's very kind of you. I enjoy our conversations, and I guess my final thought would be that there have been many moments where it seems that there couldn't be more twists and turns in this case, and we will find out soon whether the government will be held to its burden of having to prove their allegations at a trial next year. Because remember, the trial is going to be in January, scheduled for January, and if they don't cheat their way out of the trial, we'll be covering it next year in 2026.
Had the government just given the proper notice and detained on proper notice and given proper notice for third country removal, I don't think we'd be where we are. So there's a lot of incompetence happening over on the government side that has really revealed a lot of opportunity for Mr. Abrego to avail himself of his constitutional rights, and it's something to see. All right.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody. Please, again, subscribe, and we appreciate you being here. Wow, there's a ton of people here. That's awesome. Thank you. We love you, and we'll see you soon. Check out the Daily Beans if you haven't yet. It's a great way to get your daily news while being able to maintain your sanity. So I appreciate everybody joining us, and we'll be back, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
All right,
We'll do it
everybody.
again soon.
See you soon. Thanks.
Bye bye.